Hallo liebe Hörer, hallo aus Österreich, hallo aus Baden. Wir sitzen hier in der Casino Suite und sind ganz aufgeregt.
Ja, ist ja schon eine kleine Tradition geworden, dass wir hier zusammensitzen. Ulrike und Thomas vom Fotopodcast, ich, Kai von Gate 7 und Pia Parolin ist auch wieder mit dabei, hier in einer Viererrunde diesmal. Und
hallo an alle.
Wir warten heute auf einen sehr prominenten Gast.
Deswegen haben wir auch schon ganz schlecht geschlafen, oder ich zumindest. Wobei, ich weiß nicht, ob es daran lag. Und wir sind schon ziemlich aufgeregt, weil eine echte Legende gleich hier unser Zimmer betreten wird.
Ja, es ist Martin Parr.
Und der hat nämlich gestern hier in Baden einen Preis erhalten, nämlich den Lifetime Achievement Award.
Ja, vor uns auf dem Tisch liegen eine Menge bunte Postkarten. Kai und Pia sind gestern losgezogen und haben extra ein paar besondere Postkarten ausgesucht.
Ja, bei so einem Fotografen, der auf eine über 5 Jahrzehnte lange Karriere zurückblickt und schon so viele Interviews gegeben hat, war es gar nicht so einfach, Themen rauszupicken, über die wir gleich mit ihm sprechen wollen. Aber eins haben wir rausgefunden bei der Recherche, und zwar, dass er gerne Dinge sammelt, Dinge aller Art, unter anderem auch Postkarten. Und haben wir uns gestern mal aufgemacht und uns was überlegt, Pia.
Ja, und dann haben wir das ganze Städtchen durchstreift und haben jeden Laden unsicher gemacht, wo Postkarten verkauft wurden, und sind tatsächlich fündig geworden. Also es gibt tatsächlich noch Postkarten zum Verkauf überhaupt. Und es gibt auch ziemlich viele, ziemlich gruselige. Und die schlimmsten für unseren Geschmack haben wir dann mitgebracht.
Genau, die liegen jetzt hier vor uns auf dem Tisch. Wenn Martin gleich kommt, dann werden wir ihn mal bitten, da einen Blick drauf zu werfen, ob da irgendwas dabei ist, was sein Interesse weckt.
Wir haben nicht deswegen so schreckliche rausgesucht, um ihn zu ärgern, sondern weil es wahrscheinlich genau seinen Geschmack trifft, weil er eben kuriose Dinge sammelt. Und eben bei Postkarten geht's eher um boring Postcards.
Boring Postcards. Ja, haben wir gestern auch gesehen bei der Veranstaltung, als ihm der Preis verliehen wurde. Da wurde das auch angesprochen. Er hatte mal ein Buch oder auch mehrere Bücher über Postkarten gemacht und war in einem kleinen Städtchen in den USA, was passenderweise auch noch Boring hieß.
Das ist auch großartig. Ja, und dann hoffen wir, dass wir seinen Geschmack finden und damit das Eis ein bisschen brechen können, weil der hat ja schon mehr als genügend Interviews gegeben, und deswegen ist natürlich auch immer eine Herausforderung da, das Interesse zu wecken, das Eis zu brechen und eben nicht so ein 0815-Interview abzuliefern. Und da haben wir gestern die Köpfe zusammengesteckt und uns hoffentlich gut vorbereitet.
Ja, dann lasst euch überraschen, was dabei rauskommt. Wir warten jetzt auf Martin, warten darauf, dass es gleich an der Tür klopft und wir dann loslegen können. Well, good morning. Hello, Martin. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with us. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to get and meet a German audience.
Is your first podcast in German or for German?
I think it is actually, yes. I've done podcasts for strange places, but never Germany.
Yeah, there are quite a few of you out there. What do you think about the medium? Because it's photography as a visual medium for photographer to talk.
I think the series that people do on podcasts with photographers are very good. We have in the UK Ben Smith, who's very thorough. And I've done other ones as well. So yes, I think other photographers want to hear about what photographers have got to say. Yeah. And also on the Martin Parr Foundation YouTube channel, we have, I think, something like 26 interviews that I've done with photographers. And, we have a lot of people, listen to those. So it's good news.
Yeah. What the listeners can't see is the environment we are here. It's called the Casino Suite, and has a little bit of a living room atmosphere. Martin, if we were able to see your living room or to do this in your living room, what would we be seeing?
We live in a Georgian terrace in Clifton. And we have a kitchen come sitting room, combined. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. And, you'd see, there used to be a lot more things on the wall, but my wife took them down. You had a big cabinet full of very interesting items, but that got moved when I was away one time. So now it's a bit more refined. So it's looking, I guess, minimalist, classic sort of middle class taste.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because you're here with your wife and you're known to be quite a collector of things. So you answered that question already. How you?
No, but in the foundation, that's where the cabinet got moved to. We have things like Saddam Hussein watches. We have watches from Gaddafi. We have Space Dog ephemera. For some reason, I'm really mad about that. And all these different, rather strange collections all come together, and I cannot quite define why or how I got into these, but my collecting gene is a very strong urge. You can't suppress it.
We might add to your collection. We heard that you are a big fan of postcards, or that postcards is one thing that you collect. And we've been to Baden to buy a collection of postcards.
Oh, nice.
To see if there's a postcard that's to your liking.
I'm offered one, or what's going to happen here?
Yeah, you get to choose
okay.
one or two, or comment on them.
Well, I'll go. Yeah, I think it's good to actually have a bit of the town. Oh, Baden's got a racetrack, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that. You see how much you learn from postcards. These are still available now. You bought these yesterday, did you?
Yeah, just yesterday.
Okay, there you go. So I did another version of Boring Postcards for Germany. Did you see that?
No, unfortunately not. No.
Okay. If you were there last night, Andrea showed 2 volumes of Boring Postcards.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And she said there were 2. In fact, there's 3, because the third one is German Boring Postcards. And of course,
I gotta get that.
No, but these are far too interesting.
I think you can start a collection about Austrian postcards with these. You're welcome to keep them all. We made an effort yesterday.
No, I'll just take 2. It'd be greedy to take them all. But thank you. That's very kind of you.
It's actually funny to walk Baden looking for awkward postcards. So we had a lot of fun doing this.
Okay.
Thinking of you.
Speaking of collections, what's the weirdest thing you have in your collection?
I guess Saddam Hussein watches is pretty weird.
Okay.
I actually did a catalogue of those. I showed them in Arles in 2004 and produced a catalogue of the watches. So I'm quite pleased with that. And, I mean, now they're a lot more expensive. I used to buy them when they were $50, $100 each. Now I look occasionally just out of interest, and there is nothing under 500. So, I wish I bought thousands of them. It would be a very, why go to gold or equity markets when you can invest in Saddam Hussein watches?
Your collection, does it end up in your living room, or do you have a separate warehouse where you
warehouse? No, some of them are in the foundation, but not all the collections. We have a storage area as well, so most of them are buried deep into that. But remember, me photographing is a form of collecting as well.
Yeah.
So, especially when I think about places like the United Kingdom, where, of course, I'm from, and I've done more photos there than probably anywhere else. So, yes, I think of it as, I'm trying to make an archive about my time in Britain or in the United Kingdom, and collecting is a big part of that. I go to events that I hadn't gone to before. I go to seaside resorts I'd not visited previously, and I keep going, enlarging the collection. And this, of course, will be all part of my legacy.
Great.
And how much does collecting play a role in your photography, in the sense that did you have this in mind to just keep the moments for yourself before keeping them for humanity?
Well, yeah, I guess, I'm trying to think of a thorough way of collecting images in this 50-year period that I've been alive and working as a photographer. So, even though I mainly do leisure pursuits, I've also worked in offices, in factories. There's hardly anything where I haven't been to. So, this to me is very important.
How does that inform your photography? And then now you mentioned that you've worked in places like that, where I imagine also lots of the people that you photograph, the middle class people, to get this understanding of your subject matter.
I mean, I define myself by my relationship through photography to the place that I'm interested in, which in this case is the United Kingdom. So yeah, it's where the two things come together, really. And that's what photography is all about, is me having, the ability to, show the connection I have to the place that I was born and brought up in. But of course I have photographed, extensively, even in Germany. I did a commission, looking at, German gardens.
Kleingarten?
That's right. Thank you. I can never pronounce it or remember it. And I remember, I've photographed in Berlin a few times, but it's not one of the countries where I've done a huge amount of work. Mm-hmm. It's just, it just ticks over. Mm-hmm. I remember having a big show in Hanover at the Spectrum Gallery. Mm-hmm. And also I did some images in that vicinity, mm-hmm. To put into that show. Mm-hmm. So yes, I've worked more in places like Italy, America, mm-hmm. Ireland, than perhaps in Germany, but it is a place that I have photographed it. And of course I've photographed things like people eating sausages, all the things you expect me to do. Yeah. I went to Oktoberfest, all the classics.
Yeah. Martin, I believe, but before you, travel or started to travel and to photograph in other places, you photographed extensively in England and had your subject matter, pretty much defined. You know what you were looking for, and then you took it to other places. Is that right?
Well, I worked in black and white for many years before I changed to color in the early 80s. And for example, I settled in a town called Hebden Bridge in the north of England and photographed around that vicinity there. Mm-hmm. And that was a very thorough exploration of, a small community. And, there was a particular valley that I went to photograph. I photographed first the nonconformist chapel. And this was basically, where the farmers of the valley would come. And I went to all the different farms and photographed there. So, it's a much more, celebratory set of pictures. When I moved to color, it became more of a critique. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the big differences between my black and white era mm-hmm. and the color pictures that followed in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. One more question in that line. Nowadays it's, easier than ever to travel and to go places and to photograph in foreign places. Do you think that sometimes photographers tend to look a little bit too far ahead and ignoring their own backyard and better to start where they are?
Well, that's a good question because, the excitement of going to somewhere different is always, it means, you get off the plane and you immediately start to see things differently from what you know in your own home country. And that, I guess, in one sense is an inspirational feed in for the photographer. But you're right. There's no harm in photographing where you're from, however boring it is. Yeah. In fact, the more boring, the better in one sense.
Yeah. We had the chance to meet Tom Wood, a couple of years ago in France where he had an exhibition. And, I believe you two know each other Absolutely. Very well. And he's more than you focused on his own backyard. I think he had his camera in France, but he wasn't very keen on photographing in France. I think.
Yeah. Yes. I'm a great friend with Tom. He's a brilliant photographer. One of the things that stops him basically going far afield is he can't drive. So, that's an incentive for him to stay in and photograph, in and around his, his own, backyard, if you like. And he did a brilliant book with, about the buses called All Zones Off Peak. And this is where he got basically a pass to go on any bus he wanted. And, he photographed Liverpool, through the sort of, if you like, the eyes of the bus. Occasionally outside the bus, but most of the time on the bus, looking down and out onto the, into the, vernacular streets that he was going through. And that produced a very brilliant book. And we also did a lot of pictures in New Brighton together. I photographed there and did a book called The Last Resort, but he also has photographed extensively in New Brighton and did a whole book about a nightclub looking for love, which is also very good. And we have we have maybe over 500 prints of Tom Wood in the Martin Parr Foundation collection. So we're big fans.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the Martin Parr Foundation?
For sure. So it was set up in 2014, and then in 2017 we managed to get a building. The foundation bought this. We had it done out. We put shelves up. We have a gallery. So we opened in 2017. We do 4 shows a year there, and they're predominantly exhibitions about British photographers, especially documentary ones. And we have a big library, and we have a membership scheme, and we're very lively. We have a big book festival called Book Bop, which is Books on Photography, which is in October. Look it up. We have a Bop website. You can look it up on the Martin Parr Foundation. So yes, it's become quite a sort of hub for photography in Bristol, which is to the west of London, about 100 miles. So, 130 kilometers from London.
I have a question because you spoke about being bored. And did you ever get bored doing what you're doing? And did you look for new challenges or something?
No, I don't get bored doing what I'm doing because it's always exciting because, you have this possibility that you might get a good photo. I mean, every day when you go out shooting, you hope for one of those very rare icons that do pop up in your life, but they're very difficult to sort of pin down. They're very difficult to take. And they are, if you like, a byproduct of your engagement with a particular subject matter, however boring it is. And if you can get a good photo in a boring situation, that's all the better.
Yeah, and probably Homo sapiens has resources without an end. I mean, you will always find something interesting going on, just observing the others, right?
Well, if there's people, then it's always going to be interesting because they are predictable and unpredictable, strange, weird. You can tell so much about a person by the way they dress, the way they're showed up, the way they've turned out. So yeah, I would never get bored with photographing people. Even looking around at you lot today, I think you're a tribe, the podcasters tribe. How you define those exactly? I'd have to take the photos to demonstrate to you.
I'm happy you didn't take your camera along then. Another question that comes to my mind when I think of Martin Parr is the theme of respect. Would you like to speak a bit just about what you think about respect, how you have respect as something important, or in your photos, in encountering people?
I mean, I think one of the things, if you're a photographer and you photograph people, you got to like people, and I certainly like people. But in my pictures, there is a sense of mischief because, we're all flawed. I join everybody else. I have flaws too. And, I guess back in the days when I did black and white, it was easier to think of the pictures as a sort of celebration. But even now with the sort of, the color, which often can be a critique, it's not the critique of the individual person, it's of our mass behavior. Because, given certain circumstances, when we're becoming tourists, for example, we all do the same thing, and including myself, I guess. So yeah, I respect my subjects, but I'm not going to do propaganda pictures, because we're surrounded by propaganda in this world. We see, the fashion pictures in the magazines. We see travel pictures in magazines. Everything looks perfect. When you see the food in magazines, everything's beautiful. Real life is not like that, so we're constantly thrown with sort of lies, if you like. If you go into a supermarket and you walk around and you pick up a packet, on the front of the packet will be a very beautiful photograph. When you open it up, it has no relation to that photo on the front whatsoever. So we're constantly sold lies. So my job is to counter that and to show it through my own particular vision, which ultimately is respectful, but it's mischievous as well.
Yeah, to my mind, it makes really sense to look at your pictures, knowing a bit more about you, because you really represent the style of your photography in your personality. This is what I could understand by listening to you talk or listen to people talk about you. And I think this is important to be, coherent. You ask yourself about your own personality. You look in your own mirror and then find these things reflected also in society and then take photos of that. And this
is great because you're answering my question.
Sorry.
So I can just sit back and relax. So keep going.
I have to think about a new question related to that. No, but I think it's really important that as a photographer you transmit authenticity. What do you think about this?
I guess because most of the projects that I've done, are things that I do. I photograph the middle classes. I am middle class. I photograph tourists. I get on planes. I stay in hotels. I join the queue, to do all these things. So yeah, I think many of the things that I do myself are reflected in the work that I do. So it makes sense to me.
I think you're really more interested in the flaws and in the quirkiness, right? Because you told us about a book you made, the Playas, and I guess you collected 5 proposals, and you chose the worst to.
That's right.
the worst layout, and you appreciated every fault they are doing in the layout. So it's kind of your type of personality. Where does this interest in the art things come from?
I guess it's intuitive. I mean, you're talking about a book called Playas, where indeed I went with a Mexican publisher, and I said to him, I want to have a trashy kind of book. And that's what inspired him to take some of my images to designers he knew. And that's when we chose the worst design and then found a very bad printer. So that was part of the conceit of that book, is to make it as bad as possible. So it worked in that sense.
Yeah, but it's very unusual to choose the worst and the most trashiest thing. So it's really deep in your personality.
I guess it is. Yeah, I mean, I'm taking the piss out of myself. I'm taking the piss out of the world of publishing. I'm taking the piss out of all those photographers that want the perfect book. All those photographers that think, when they get a book published, all their lives are going to change radically. It's not the case. As you know, most books that come out completely fail. You get an initial sale to your friends and family, maybe 100, and then underneath your bed and in your attic, you have 500 copies of a book that no one wants. So why do these people publish this book? These is probably the kind of people who are listening to this. Vanity. They think the world needs their pictures. And most of the time they don't. So I'm sorry, all those folks out there, please feel free to turn this off but I challenge you, is your book really that good? The answer is probably no. Because maybe 5,000 books a year are published in photography, and maybe 20 of them are really pretty good. I mean, it takes me, this is a terrible thing to admit, it takes me about 5 seconds to work out if a book is any good. I flip through, I immediately see some pictures, and then I recognize there's the influence of Nan Goldin, there's the influence of Wolfgang Tillmans. And then it's when I can't work out the heritage of those images that I get interested. I'm then trying to work out what this photographer is trying to say. Are they any good? Have they got a unique vision of the world? And most of the time, as I say, they don't, because you can read their heritage.
Yeah, they just reproduce something they've seen. And
now we have this new trend, street photography. There's street photography festivals everywhere. So we used to have festivals, and now we have street festivals. And I've been to a few of these, and you see the same kind of pictures recycled. Some of them are good. Most of them are sort of, poorer versions of people like Matt Stewart. I'm sure I don't even need to ask if there's a Berlin Street Photography Festival, because there's going to be one, isn't there?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Where does that come from, this interest in street photography?
Well, I didn't do it. Technically I'm a street photographer occasionally, but I guess this is a genre that we can all do, and most of the people can't do it. From time to time, you get a new voice coming into the street that makes things look different. Say Bruce Gilden, Eamon Doyle. I remember when Eamon Doyle's book came out. That was very funny. The title of which is an exclamation mark. Do you know this guy? Have you heard of him?
No.
He's an Irish photographer who did a brilliant book. It must have come out maybe 10, 12 years ago. This is back in the day when we had, what's the precursor to Instagram? Not Netflix, honestly. Flickr. Remember Flickr?
Yes. Yeah.
Its day has come and gone, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I used to occasionally write on Flickr, and I wrote on Flickr, this is probably the best new street photography book I've seen in the last 20 years. And everyone bought it immediately, and then it sold out. And then he became a very well-known street photographer. So check him out. Eamon Doyle from Ireland.
I will. What made it so special in your eyes?
I hadn't seen his pictures before. He photographed people from the back, not very promising, but the way he aligned them up with the street and made them very simplistic, very bold, it just sort of worked. So I knew I hadn't seen those pictures before. That's the great thing about it.
Yeah. So you might have just discouraged a lot of people listening to the podcast and stop doing street photography.
That's right.
Maybe this makes the world a better place.
It does, because
maybe there's some pictures.
there's a therapy process here, you know. I mean, also it gives people something to do. I mean, you know, a lot of people don't work. A lot of people don't have children, and they're wondering what to do with their free time. So they become street photographers.
They could be burned up.
Martin, do you think it's getting perhaps more difficult today to be really original, to find something new? Sometimes I think you might have been privileged to have started in the 80s or started even earlier, because the world was not that explored and not that much seen. And so you needed a lot of creativity for sure. But was it easier for you at that time than it is for someone starting today?
Obviously, there were less photographers in the 70s when my career really started. So, yeah, and there were less books published. I mean, back in the 70s, there'd be like 20 books a year that you'd see. And, you know, you could buy half of them and feel you've got everything covered. Nowadays, you can't think about buying the photo books that are coming out because there's so many. But the other thing is now, you know, we have things like Instagram. And if you're any good and your pictures really do have that vision that we're talking about, people will find you, and through word of mouth, you'll get a good following on Instagram. I mean, I talked to someone like Keith from Setanta Books. He publishes books occasionally, and he says if anyone's got over 50,000 followers on Instagram, I'd be interested in publishing their book, on the grounds that maybe a quarter of them or even 10% of them might be interested in buying the book of that particular person. So yeah, things are very different. You know, previously we had to go through the traditional gatekeepers in magazine editors, you know, gallery owners. But now there are those still exist, and we still have things like folio reviews, but now we have other ways of launching a career. So that's exciting in one sense.
And what do you think about the idea that Instagram brought some kind of democratization of photography?
Yes, no, I agree. Yeah, all your statements are correct. I can.
You see, I quit. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's the democracy of photography. Yeah. And even with books, you know, anyone can publish a book now. Previously, you know, you had to but you can get a print on demand books for $50. And I mean, that's a very good way of working out, you know, if your work can work in a book, for example. We have the famous case of people like Alex Soth, who made, you know, an edition of his images from Sleeping by the Mississippi. Gerhard Steidl saw this and said, I'll publish your book. You know, and the rest is history. He's become one of the best known and most important documentary photographers in the States. So yeah, he did it through publishing his own book initially.
Martin, you have taught photography as well in workshops, and I believe in Belfast, at a university. What is it that you think about photography that can be taught, and what is impossible to teach?
No, I mean, someone's either got that magic eye that's going to help them become an interesting photographer. And then, you know, through the process of teaching, you can encourage them to sort of understand what about their work is working, what about their work is not working, and build on these. So that's an important process. So yeah, I think there is something that can be taught in photography, but you'll see some people just haven't got it. You know, you can tell if someone's got that sort of bit of magic in their work that potentially can become really strong work. So that's, if in a sense, the sort of pleasure of teaching. You can spot this and encourage them and try and get people to think about their own work and work out themselves what's working, why it's working. That's the thing you've got to ask. Why is this picture better than that picture? What is it about it that makes it work? That's the magic of photography, and that's how you find, you know, and develop a voice within photography.
You at a very early age, I think around 13, said that you wanted to become a photographer, influenced by your grandfather. What was it at that point that made you so sure to make a career out of photography?
I guess just an intuitive feel that this was the right thing for me to do. You know, I just love the challenge of taking these pictures. And then I went to study photography at Manchester Polytechnic, and that gave me a real opportunity to develop my work. So, you know, it's an intuitive feel that I had. I've got to do this. This is life or death. And I will become a photographer come what may. Back in those days, of course, I had no idea how I'd earn a living from photography. And as I mentioned before, my early years, it was teaching that basically gave me the income. And it's only when I joined Magnum, and that was in the late 80s, 89, something like that, I started to be represented by them, and then became a member finally in 1994. And that gave me, open access, better access to getting assignments from magazines. It was back in the day when magazines had money to actually spend on photography. These days, everyone now wants free content. That's something you have to put up with. But we still do try and license images if we can in Magnum, but it's never easy. Mm-hmm. But who wants to do something that's easy?
Yeah. Who does?
I would like to touch again the social media, because I think I read that a couple of years ago you said you're not on Instagram, you don't want people to follow more than there are enough people following you without Instagram. So, but you changed your mind. Why is that?
That's not the case. Yes, I think I was very slow to pick up on Instagram. And I thought, rather pompously, I don't need it. But now, of course, we've now got 750,000 followers, and it's a very important part that it plays in the foundation and our bookshop. So when I have a new book out, and I have done a lot of books, there's no doubt about that, and they will keep coming because I've got many books coming up in the next few years. The first place that we tell people about this is through Instagram. Because if we have that many followers, of course, there's going to be people that are interested. So I was very slow. Okay. Also, I was a bit slow on changing to digital. That happened in 2008. I should have maybe changed a few years earlier, but I only changed when they had the new full frame DSLRs, and suddenly the quality of the images got a lot better. And now, of course, I get so frustrated with people who are still analog photographers because they think their work has something special about it because they've done it in film. So there's a lot of film snobs out there, and it's rubbish really, because ultimately whether you're shooting in film or digital, you've got to be telling a story. You've got to be telling someone about the connection you've made to the world out there through your work. And if you're using film, it means you have to basically change film either every 10 shots if it's 6.7 or every 36 if it's 35mm. I put a card and it keeps going for 500. It's great. And, I can, especially when I'm photographing things at night, photographing parties, I've done a lot of pictures of people dancing. So my dancing pictures improved dramatically after I went to digital because I can work out, I know that, the basics. I can look at what's going on. I can work out the ISO I need to be on, what shutter speed I need to be on. And I can check this by looking at the back of the camera. I can change obviously from, 400 ISO to 1600 ISO with just turning one button.
Yeah.
So this has made my ability to photograph things at night a lot better. So my night photography came on leaps and bounds when I changed to digital.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Do you have debates about, also those chemicals, aren't they horrible? Are there a lot of film people in Germany?
Yeah. It's also trending. And as you say, it's often coming with an attitude of snobism.
Mm-hmm. And colleges, that's even worse. I can't stand it when these colleges, have all these dark rooms there, because the moment you leave college, and you're out in the real world, if you say to a magazine, yes, I'd love to do that job for you, and you will be paying to process my film and make prints, they're going to say, well, we've got plenty more people where, they're just as good who don't do that. So it's crazy that they're teaching. But of course, colleges are run by analog children. They've made it in the analog world, and now they want to put impose their sort of, morality about film onto the other students. And it's crazy. They shouldn't be doing that. Hands up in Germany if you're an analog, an analog fossil teaching photography in a college. That's the second group of people oh my God, I'm not going to, if I go on this at this rate, I'll be banned from going to Germany, right?
But don't you think it's nice in a way to see that young people rediscover analog photography for themselves in the terms that they put more effort, more time, more thought maybe in the whole process. I mean, some maybe do it because they want to be special and something, but I think there's more to it. And
No, I take the point really. I mean, people are rebelling against being digital. You know, it's like sound systems. You know, we're all going back to the valve because perhaps, you know, the valve transmitters sound better than a digital one, but I wouldn't probably know the difference. I'd have to go to someone like Tom Wood, who's a, you know, completely crazy collector of, you know, valve transformers. You know, he listens to music at his place. It is mind blowing. You know, it's very good. And it's the same with film. You know, it's natural for people to rebel against what they're told to do, such as, you know, forget film and go digital. So yeah, I can accept it, but I want to see their pictures and see if they're any good.
Well, I remember that once I listened to someone giving a talk, and he might have been in his 30s, and he said, well, we all came to photography, to real photography with a camera through our cell phones. And that's when I realized, oops, I'm getting old. Well, there is quite a shift in generations, right? And
I mean, the other thing is of course, you know, our phones are getting so much better. I mean, I've got an iPhone 15 now, which is amazing the way it can actually see things in the dark that I can't see with my own eyes, you know, and the quality is getting better and better. You can now shoot on RAW on a phone, you know, and of course, the other great thing about it is you always look less threatening. If you get your phone out, people think, oh, they don't really think much about it. Whereas if you get a big DSLR out, you know, people are going to think, you know, they'll be very wary of it. And as you know, there are many people in this world that, you know, hate being photographed and they're going to pounce on you. They wouldn't do that with a phone. So that's the great advantage. So maybe in 10 years time, well, I'll be probably dead by then, but maybe, you know, we'll all be using phones and DSLRs will be put in the bin. And
how do you react if someone looks at you or is aggressive against you because you took their pictures? Maybe it never happens to you because you know how to do it, but how do you react?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I might say, you know, when they say, oh, delete that, you know, I'd be very wary to delete it. Although probably, you know, given the chances, it's not going to be a very good photo, so I could delete it. I'll point out to them that they've been photographed 500 times already today. So yeah, you know, you do get involved in these weird conversations. It happens to all photographers. No one is exempt from that. It's an occupational hazard. And it's something you just have to put up with.
Yeah, maybe they find themselves in a Martin Parr book one day and are very proud.
Well, people do write in, you know, and we'll always send someone a print or a file if it really is them in the picture. If it's a portrait, then I've arranged for them to get a copy of that portrait anyway. You know, because what happened, interestingly, although here I am moaning about, you know, the world of C prints and the analog world, but I go through the computer, make a selection, and then we send these high-res files off to a lab in Manchester, in fact, in the north of England, and they then print on C paper. So they're basically, you know, chemical prints, and send us back the following day, you know, the prints and I'll make the final edit from the print, because ultimately the print is, you know, going to be my income. So I want to see how it looks as a print more than anything else. So yes, and then I can save these pictures. I'll do the final edit. Half of them will go. And I've got a corner in the foundation or in our production department where I've got maybe 750,000 images, all on 2030. And predominantly they're all C prints.
So we cannot count on NFT Martin Parr very soon.
Photography is very, very complex. So there's many phases and processes involved. Which is the one that you enjoy most? Making the photographs or later editing them, putting them together in a book?
I think making it, being out there, you know, and having things happening in front of you that, you know, could make an interesting photo. You know, so that possibility is always there. And, you know, you've got to try and juggle, make some order out of the chaos in front of you. And when you go to an event, you know, that's what happens. I go around everywhere. I will look for the corner of something where I think there's going to be potential. And I'll come back to those, you know, sort of hot spots that I've identified. And, you know, then try and, you know, I've got to try and capture the spirit of what I see in front of me into an image. And that's a very difficult thing to do. It's very easy to turn up to an event that you're really taken by And just by getting your camera out and photographing for, say, 3 hours, you think you've got the atmosphere of that place. Most of the time we haven't. So I'm constantly disappointed when I look through my edit and think, what happened there? I didn't really capture it. But there's always that possibility that you did.
Do you feel, when you've taken a picture, do you feel that it's been it was a good one? Or is it later, looking at them, on the screen?
No, I pretty much know when I'm onto something that, is going to be, strong enough to make a good picture. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just occasionally, a picture I hadn't sort of thought that was the case will come up and be actually quite interesting. And also when I go back through my contact prints, so during COVID, I was looking at some of my contacts that I took in the 80s and found some pictures there that I'm amazed I didn't print that up. So yes, I do occasionally go back to the sort of catalogue of images that I've got, go to the contacts and find different images that need to be printed.
I'm sorry, just to follow up on that, I find that very interesting that you said that there's some images that you, at the time when you took them, you didn't realize that they had the potential. What was it that later on when you looked at them with a couple of years of time that had passed?
I think it's things like the clothes they're wearing, the position they're in, how they look, how they look in the picture, all these things, so what might be a very boring picture now, think of people in supermarkets. We would never normally think that would be an interesting place to take pictures. But when I look back at my supermarket pictures in the 80s, I can see the whole way in which the supermarket's laid out has changed. So yeah, that's the sort of thing. And the clothes that people wear, that's the sort of thing that become more interesting as time goes by.
Are your mobile phone serious?
Yes, that's right. Yep. I mean, phones with aerials. And, well, you heard me talk, about things like selfie sticks. Mm-hmm. They've come and they've gone. So I'm glad I captured them when they were at their peak.
And I saw you were out photographing here in Baden. Did you catch something you find really...
It's unlikely.
Yeah.
I just brought my camera with me and I took a few pictures yesterday, but... There'll be no more than pictures that go into the archive. There's nothing there that's going to be any good, basically. They're all failures. But, there is a value in a documentary failure because it's showing you what the place is like. Mm-hmm. So, the pool, I don't know if you've been to the Lido here. That's pretty interesting. But, it's difficult to wander around there and photograph all the kids playing and everything. So it's not something that I think would be particularly easy because if you did that these days, you get into trouble. Whereas when I did the Last Resort in the early 80s, I could photograph kids playing without anyone bothering me at all. So things have changed in terms of getting access and photographing, especially places like beaches.
Coming back to your foundation one more time, it's manifold that, it's about your own pictures to archive your own pictures. And, the other side is, to foster, British, documentary photography and to help emerging photographers get going and develop their art. Can you elaborate a little bit on the foundation and its goals?
Okay. Well, I guess its goals is to give a platform to the very underrated other British documentary photographers. I've been very lucky. I've been able to make a good living, but many of them really haven't. And they're very good. So it's a great chance for me to purchase their work, put it in our collection, and also to give them shows, exhibitions. Also, it's great to, do a show for an emerging photographer. And to suddenly and a book to come out at the same time to get the publicity that deserves. So yeah, a lot of people do write in to us and I try and answer everything, but I can't be a service to sort of be, critiquing all the people that come to me, with their work. Although occasionally, maybe once a year, I'll do some open reviews and encourage people. Well, we literally sell slots. Members get priority. But yeah, all the people out there, you should come. For example, we have a big book festival in October. This year, it's on the 19th and 20th of October. We have a Trent Park exhibition up. Trent's doing a talk. I don't know if you know him. Yeah. So he's a very famous photographer. a very brilliant photographer. So we're doing a show with him because every 2 years is the Bristol Photo Festival as well. So we have many shows. We have a big retrospective of Rinko Kawachi at the Arnolfini, the biggest gallery in the centre of Bristol. So it's a very exciting time to come and to look at. We have 60 publishers coming. We have photographers selling their own books from a table. We have 10 talks going on. It's a big weekend for us. So I encourage your readership. No, that's wrong, isn't it? Your listenership. Yeah. To come to Bristol in October. Books on Photography. We call it BOP. BOP has a website as well.
Okay. We'll link to that.
I would like to ask you about the young people. As far as I understood, you also teach, you're giving talks, so you kind of motivate them. What are the messages that you pass on to young people?
Well, I guess I do talks, like I gave a talk here on Thursday night, and many people come up to me and say, "Oh, that's great. It was very inspiring," which is very nice to hear. So yeah, I do teach at Belfast, so I go over maybe once a year and give crits to some of the students there, and occasionally on the foundation, the Martin Parr Foundation, we offer paid crits to other photographers. They show me their work and I give a review, but I don't want you to think that they can all write to me with their work, because I wouldn't be able to deal with it. So yeah, I get many requests that I can't really fulfill because I've got too many other things on that I've got to do.
But if you were to give a recommendation to someone who wants to get more into serious documentary,
well, I mean, I think there are things on the internet like me giving tutorials. It's there. I think lessons for Martin Parr. There's lots of stuff on the internet where I'm talking about how to go forward as a photographer. It's all there.
You said that you see in many photographers their influences, and they are trying to copy another photographer. It has happened to you as well. I think there are many street photographers out there trying to be a little bit like you. How do you feel about that when you see pictures that were inspired by your style and your subject matter?
I do come across that sort of imagery from time to time, especially color and flash, because that's something that I played a lot with in the 80s. That's probably become my strongest palette. So yeah, a lot of people use that. That's not to say, that using flash and color, it means that you're automatically assumed to be a Martin Parr clone. No, there are many different ways of using it, different ways of applying it to the work that you see. So yeah, it's, but if you don't learn from the people that have come before you, it's going to be a big problem. So you've got to really, study the form in contemporary work and understand why and how the great photographers of our generation have made good work. And remember to think in 50 years' time, we'll be looking back. I won't be here. You might be hanging on. And we'll think at all those 50 years and the great photographers. So all those great photographers have yet to be discovered and yet to be, find the voice within their own work to make it happen and for their work to get the strong vision that we all need.
So it's important to look at other photographers' work, but then to distance yourself from them.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no harm in using other people and copying it in the first instance and then trying to grow your own vision out of that. So yeah, I'm encouraging people, if you like, to copy the ones that you like and then, grow in a different way out of that.
How did that happen in your case when you shifted from black and white to your color photography? And, was that a consequence of your, or giving the right aesthetics to your subject matter with these garish colors with the,
Well, I was copying, the palette of commercial photography, but also I was encouraged by the fact that in the late 70s, we began to see, photography shows in color in big museums in America. We think of, Errol Stern, Stephen Shaw, that whole generation of color photographers suddenly being recognized and lauded because they were working in color. Previous to that, there's always this bias against color where it was associated with commercial photography, which is exactly what I actually chose to copy. So yeah, it's, these things are out there to distract you, but then you grow out of it and find your own voice if you can. as I've mentioned, most of you lot will fail to do that.
Do you still grow as a photographer?
Well, I hope so, in the sense that, I don't want to rest on my laurels, but it is a bit depressing because ultimately the work that people want from me is The Last Resort, which I shot over 40 years ago. The book keeps on selling. So, I'm trying to do new things and experiment. I've played around with the telephoto lens and what that can do, and did a whole book on that called Beach Therapy. So yeah, I try and think of things that are slightly different. So I don't want to just copy what I've done in the past, because that's too easy. But I'm also looking at my legacy, and, I have all these shows to come to and attend, and, like Here, coming to Here, which is very nice. So I get distracted, but the summer is my main shooting time. So I've done a lot of shooting this summer already, which I'm about to sort of finally edit and look at and see if there's anything any good, or whether it'll all go into the sort of documentary but no great picture column, which is pretty big in my case.
At the foundation, there's people working with you, and I think you producing such a great amount of work, you need also outside help to deal with all the processes around it. Can you describe a little bit how many people are involved you're working with?
So there are 3 people that work for me. So first, a fantastic woman called Charlotte. She looks after all my print sales. She looks after all my exhibitions. And then I have 2 people, Mike and Louis, in the production department. They're scanning the negs from, if we're looking at old negatives, processing the files, making prints, preparing the prints for different exhibitions, preparing prints for print sales. And then, so there's 3 of us that are directly working for my business. And then there's 8 people working for the foundation. And, the great thing is I've got to pay them a salary every month. So I've got to keep selling prints and keep doing fashion work to subsidize that. But, I'm very happy to do it. It's great. It's great to have this opportunity to, I've done very well in photography. A lot of my colleagues in British photography haven't done as well. So it's a great way of supporting them and giving them a platform for their fantastic work.
You can look back on a great career, more than 5 decades of photography. Is there anything looking back that you wish you would have done differently?
Well, I do remember the day that the statue was pushed into the harbour in Bristol of this slave-owning guy called Colston. And I was at the march that same day, and it then started to go through the city. So I thought, well, I've done this now, I'll go back. And then, of course, an hour later, I see on the news that the statue. So I literally missed that by 5 minutes. So yeah, I do have these things that get me completely annoyed because I missed it. But, the think of the things that I've missed over the years is much bigger than the things I've actually got. But, you've got to move on. You can't bear grudges against that.
Yeah, like you said, there might be a great picture just around the corner, another one. So,
well, this is it, or different events that I could have gone to. No, I miss a lot of things, but I also, the law of averages will help you. If you're out there enough, then you're going to get some things as well.
Has the Queen been a Martin Parr fan?
I don't think so. I have. I did photograph her quite a lot, and I got a famous picture of her getting in her chauffeur-driven car. And of course, she's one of the few people in the world who can actually photograph from behind, and you'll know who it is. So yeah, I didn't really have much communication with the Queen.
Is there, this is probably a question you get asked a lot, but, and difficult to answer, but, among all your pictures, is there, are there 1 or 2 that stick out for you personally?
Well, again, I'd come back to The Last Resort. They're probably my most famous pictures, and therefore a few from that series would be in that category. Yeah.
Okay, to end this on a maybe more positive note, then you've discouraged a lot of people quitting photography. What would you say? Why does it still make sense these days to start with photography and to pick up photography?
Well, first off, it's such an important medium these days because we still need photos. When we look back at world events, it's always the photos that we remember more than the actual film, for example. But also it gives you a chance as a creative person to go out there, if you like, make a connection to the world out there and to basically stamp your own voice on that. Because given the fact that there's so many of us all trying to do the same thing, this ultimate creative challenge that we have to express ourselves through photography, and the potential of that to get something interesting is still a very attractive proposition. So, get out there and shoot, and trying to find your own voice, and, happy shooting is what I say to your audience. Be creative and, prove to all the other people that you've got what it takes.